My name is Susie Pappas, and today is May 9th, 2019. I'm interviewing Nancy Grosfeld at the Max M. Fisher Federation Building in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. This interview is being recorded as part of the Women in Leadership Oral History Project. Do you give permission to the Leonard and Simon Jewish Community Archives to publish, duplicate, or otherwise use this recording for educational purposes and for use as deemed appropriate by the archives?
Yes, I did.
The Women's Philanthropy Department of the Jewish Federation has had several names throughout its history, but for the purpose of this interview, we will refer to it as its current name, Women's Philanthropy, but you can use whatever name you're comfortable with. Nancy, when and where were you born?
I was born September 20th, 1943, at Harper Hospital in Detroit.
And tell me about your birth order. Do you have siblings? Where did you?
I have a brother who lives in Ann Arbor who's 4 years younger than I am.
And what did your father do?
My father was in the scrap metal business.
And did your mother work?
My mother started to work when I was in college. She was a substitute teacher.
Okay, so what schools did you go to for elementary? And we'll just say elementary and high school.
I went to Halley School in Detroit, and I went to Liggett School for middle school in Grosse Pointe.
And for high school?
Don Darrow High School.
So you came
in
back.
Royal Oak.
You came
we
back.
moved to Huntington Woods.
Okay. Yeah, that's I wanted to ask you. Where did you live when you were growing up?
We lived in a flat in Detroit. My grandmother lived upstairs, and we lived downstairs. My mother was the youngest of 13, so I really got to know all my aunts and uncles and cousins well because they were always coming to visit my grandmother.
And then you said you moved out to Huntington Woods at what point?
When I was entering 9th grade.
Okay, so then you went to Don Darrow. And after Don Darrow, college?
I went to Michigan State, and I got my degree in social work, and I got a summer job in the emergency room of a hospital in Pontiac, and I loved it, and I was scheduled to go to Michigan to get my master's in social work, but I decided to continue as a nurse's aide for the year. I went to Sinai, and then I went back to school and got my RN.
Did you actually work as a nurse?
I did, yes.
Tell us about that.
I combined my social work background with my RN, and I worked at a place called Fairlawn Center, which was a residential treatment center for children and youth at Pontiac State Hospital.
How long did you do that for?
5 years. I worked till the morning my daughter was born.
Wow, so you really enjoyed that.
I loved it.
That's great. Okay, when you were growing up, did your family belong to a synagogue?
Yes, we belonged to Temple Bethel.
So how would you say religion was observed in your home?
We celebrated Shabbat. We celebrated all of the holidays. I went to Sunday school through 11th grade. I was consecrated and confirmed. I don't think they did bat mitzvahs back in that time.
No, they didn't. So when you were growing up, was your family involved in charity work that you remember? Did your mother do any kind of charitable work?
My mother was involved with the Federation in the area of campaign and archives, and she was also a JCC board member and involved with National Council and with our synagogue. She sang in the choir, and I think there was one other place, but I'm not remembering.
Oh,
and my dad was involved with the JCC also.
So when you were in high school, did you do any kind of charitable work, or were you involved in youth group or do anything that had to do with being Jewish?
Aside from going to Sunday school, I didn't.
Okay. So, how did you get involved with Federation?
Reluctantly. I used to get mailings asking me if I was interested in educational programs or getting involved with the young adult division, but which it was called then, now Next Gen. But I really wasn't interested. And then I was called a number of times to help on Super Sunday, and I finally ran out of excuses. So I started out doing Super Sunday and prayed that no one would answer the phone. I didn't like asking for money. And then when I got married, my former mother-in-law was Belle Kukas, the blessed memory, and she was very involved with Federation, and she talked me into being a Lion of Judah, so I guess that was the beginning. And I came to some meetings, and I liked what I heard, and I got involved.
So, so being involved with Lion of Judah was the first time that you remember really being involved with women's department or women's philanthropy?
Yes, other than Super Sunday.
So what about it struck your interest?
I liked the mission of the Federation. I was very interested in at-risk populations, particularly the elderly and people with special needs. I did not appreciate the importance of Jewish education or Jewish continuity at that point. I enjoyed working with a lot of wonderful women. In fact, I really didn't know any of the women in women's department until I got involved, and now so many of them are lifelong friends. That was really a wonderful experience.
Well, that leads to my next question. Who were the leaders of women's philanthropy when you first became involved?
I think like Dulcie and Carolyn Greenberg, and Edith Jackier, and then of course when I finally came onto the board, I think Paula Glazier was president before me, and before her was Beverly and Sharon Hart and Penny Blumenstein and a lot of wonderful women. Edie Slotkin.
So who would you say were your mentors, or who supported you at the beginning of your involvement?
I would say, I would probably say Penny. Penny and I became good friends when she was chairing either Lion or Ruby, probably Lion, and I was one of her workers. And we developed a friendship and introduced our husbands, and they became good friends. But Penny was really the one that always pushed me to do more and pushed me beyond my comfort zone. I probably wouldn't have had any of the leadership roles that I've had if it were not for her encouraging me.
Well, so how would you say she did that? Because, you know, lots of people maybe would push people, but you don't always take it up, but you took it up. So how would you say, can you remember how she might have?
Well, she would tell me I could do it, I should do it, it's important that I do. She sort of came at me from all angles, and I'm grateful to her in hindsight for doing that.
Do you feel like she sort of pushed you to do it and you didn't want to let her down, so you kind of did it?
No,
Okay.
no, I don't think that was the case.
Well, you did it quite well, so we'll go on from there. So when you first became involved in women's department, women's philanthropy, can you remember some of the programs that you were first involved in?
I remember being involved with Tove. I remember being involved with the Women's Seder, And was there a food for thought? Yes. And I think those were the initial programs I got involved with.
So what did your family, your husband, your kids think about your involvement when you first became involved?
I think when I first became involved, I think they were very pleased that I was involved. My husband, from the very beginning, was always very encouraging and supportive. When I took on leadership roles that took time from all of them, they were very pleased when my role was completed.
Okay. So was your husband involved? Were your kids involved in Federation?
Jimmy was on the investment committee, which put him on the board, the foundation board. I don't think he ever came to a board meeting. Jimmy is not a process person and doesn't have a lot of patience for committee meetings. My daughter has not been involved with Federation.
So when you were first involved in Federation, what were some of the positions that you first held?
I remember chairing Lion and Ruby, and I remember being campaign chair. I don't think I was ever an education chair.
Yeah, I wanted to say that when you first became involved, there was an education side and a campaign side.
Right.
So you were not involved with both tracks.
Correct.
Okay. Did you see yourself when you first became involved becoming campaign chair?
No.
Well, how did
no.
that come about that you became campaign chair?
Someone asked me. It really never entered my mind.
And when they asked you, how did you feel about it?
Well, I would assume I was very flattered, but I was also very surprised. And knowing me, I probably thought, why are they asking me? I can't do this, but I ended up doing it.
And you said Paula Glazier was the person you worked with?
Paula was president before me.
Well, she must have been
I was her campaign chair.
You were
yes.
the associate campaign chair and then the campaign chair
yes.
to Paula. Okay. So do you remember some of your duties as campaign chair?
I remember I had to do a lot of speaking, and I was always such a nervous wreck having to speak in public. When I would sit down, I didn't remember one word I had said.
How did you go about that? That you'd have to get up and do these speeches. How did you kind of fortify yourself?
Well, you know, for many years, I didn't take on leadership positions with any organizations because I did not want to speak in public. But I finally decided that I wasn't going to let my fear cripple me. And if Doreen Hermelin could do it, who was also a nervous wreck, I could do it. So that's how I fortified myself.
So did you find it got easier as you went along, or do you still today feel nervous?
It's certainly easier now. It is not my favorite thing to do, especially if it involves speaking extemporaneously at all. I feel much more comfortable if I have something written down.
So I'm going to deviate a little bit here. I remember that you had certain processes when you were campaign chair and then president that made it, you did things maybe a little differently than other people. Do you remember any of that?
No.
Okay. Well, one of the things that you were very specific about sure you were going to do is that you were going to learn about everything there was to learn about in Federation.
Oh, that's true. You're reminding me, when I became campaign chair, I visited all of our agencies and our day schools because since I had to speak about them, I really wanted to understand them. And I remember when I went to JVS, that really excited me, and my interest in Federation deepened. That's right, I forgot all about that.
I remember that. And so, let me go back to this. Do you remember the staff that you worked with at the time, and did you find them supportive, or how did you find the staff that you worked with, and who did you work with?
Helen Katz was head of Women's Department during my tenure, and Esther Weitzman was a support staff person, and Tony Hayes was a support staff person, and then Heidi Hess was one of the associates, and there was one, Margot something was an associate, and I found them all very helpful, and I enjoyed working with all of them.
So you went from campaign chair of women's to president.
Yes.
How would you talk about the differences between the two positions? And how did you like one more than the other, or how did you find those two positions?
I loved being campaign chair.
Because?
I was very excited about Federation and our agencies, and it was very important to me that we raise money, because of course without money you can't do anything. And I loved the people I worked with. I met a lot of wonderful women that I would never have met otherwise. And it was very collegial, and it was fun. We had a great time. Being president was a bigger responsibility, but yet it was more creative, and introduced me to a whole nother side of Women's Department, which I enjoyed. And again, it expanded my friendships with women who became involved in the educational side of the programming.
So when we started this interview, and you talked about Super Sunday and how you were hoping that people wouldn't answer the phone because you didn't want to ask for money, did that feeling change as you progressed in the leadership roles of Women's Department?
Well, I became much more comfortable asking for money. And most of the people I asked for money were people who were already giving to Federation, so I was either asking them to continue at their level or increase depending on the individual and their abilities. So it became much more comfortable. Actually, I like fundraising.
So talk a little bit. Tell us how tell me how you feel about fundraising, because you're very good at it, and I think it's interesting that you started off uncomfortable and now you are good at it.
Well, I have a greater understanding of the things I'm fundraising for. I know the people much better because there are people I have been talking to about their gifts for years and years. Now that I got involved with the General Federation, I spoke to both men and women, but I always tried to speak to them as a couple, because I always felt it was very important for the woman to understand what was going on and what Federation is all about.
Tell me, what do you think about a woman's gift? Why is that important?
I think a woman's gift is very important because I think when a woman makes a gift, it really engages and empowers her. Most women are interested in where their money is going and what it is being spent on. Many women are very influential with their husbands in supporting them in making gifts to the campaign. I know my husband certainly wouldn't be giving what he's giving if it were not for me. I think it's very important also because I know when I first got involved with Women's Department, I remember going to my first Fisher meeting. I went there because I was campaign chair and Jimmy couldn't go, so they asked me to go. There was only one other woman there, and certainly that has changed now, and there are lots of women there. But a lot of women did not make their own gifts. They made a family gift. So they really, the husband really decided, most likely, what the gift was going to be. And the woman really had no idea what Federation did. Then, so often, we'd have these major donors, and they would pass away, and we would want their spouses to be involved and engaged and continue the family gift, but they've been busy with the DIA or the symphony the last 20, 30, or 40 years. So I think it's very important to get women involved at a young age and to educate them and to empower them and get them engaged and active.
So what do you see the role of women's philanthropy to be? Do you think it's important to have that as a separate department or division in Federation?
I think it is important. First of all, I have to say, women's philanthropy was a fabulous training ground. I learned so much there. I don't think I would have ever done the things I did if I hadn't started in women's department. I think, too, knowing me, I might have been a little intimidated with the men at that point in my life when I was young, and there were a whole different generation of men who were involved. I think that it's a good place for women to find their voice and to educate themselves and become knowledgeable and become comfortable and feel passionate about what they're doing. And I know when I got involved with general campaign, it was a whole different experience. I mean, so many men at our major gifts meetings do not know the depth and breadth of what we do. But the women in women's department, they knew.
So why do you think it's important for women to give their own gift as opposed to family giving?
Well, I think I explained that earlier, but I'll repeat it. I think when a woman makes the gift in her own name, it engages her, it empowers her, it hopefully makes her feel more impassioned about where her money is going. It's oftentimes it's the woman who helps propel the husband in his giving, and
Right.
down the road, so often the woman is the one who ends up surviving her spouse, and you want the woman to stay engaged and involved.
So when you were involved with women's department, how did it interact with general campaign?
I think that we were not as valued as we could have been at that time. And I think we weren't brought into the mix the way we should have been. However, when I became campaign chair, because we were major donors, I think that I probably got a little more attention because of that. And so we did start doing more with the general campaign and with the young adult division, now Next Gen. And I remember when Netanyahu came to town, we did something, and then there was a main event which involved all 3 departments, and so we started to get more involved. And now, as I say, you go to a major gifts meeting on different levels, and you see women there.
Right. So what do you hope to see for the future of Women's Department?
I hope to see women engaged. I hope to see women in leadership roles. I think that women tend to be especially good at process, at listening, in attending meetings. I am happy to see, as I say, women at all levels of fundraising events.
So you've had an interesting trajectory. So you finished as Women's Department President, and then you went into general campaign. Was it right away, or was there some time off there? Or?
For 1 year, I worked on a strategic plan for Women's Department after I completed my presidency. And then I became a co-chair of the King David Society. And then I became general campaign co-chair with Larry Lax, who's a wonderful man. I love Larry. I really didn't expect to be asked to do that either.
And then you were president.
And then I became president. I didn't expect to do that
How
either.
did you enjoy those roles in general campaign?
I did. But I don't think I could have done either of those roles without the training I got in Women's Department and the mentoring and the exposure.
Well, thank you, Nancy. I think we've covered everything, and I appreciate your spending time with us. Is there anything else before we end that you'd like to add?
Nothing that comes to mind.
Well, we're very fortunate to have you in our community, and I'm thankful that you took the time.
Thank you.